In a tiny Spanish village, inside a modest house with a concrete kitchen floor, faces began to appear. Not painted, not drawn, but slowly forming out of the cement itself, as if something beneath the house was trying to look up. When the terrified family destroyed the floor, the faces came back. This is one of the most disturbing alleged hauntings in modern history. A case that has attracted scientists, priests, psychics, and skeptics for more than 50 years. Tonight, we travel to Bélmez de la Moraleda and step into the House of the Living Faces. Our story begins on the 23rd of August, 1971, in the small Andalusian village of Bélmez de la Moraleda. In southern Spain, a housewife named María Gómez Cámara was cooking in her kitchen on Real 5 when she noticed something odd on the concrete floor. A dark stain, roughly in the shape of a human face. At first, she thought it was just a mark from cooking or from the damp floor. But over the next days, the stain seemed to change. Neighbors later claimed that eyes, a nose, and a mouth gradually became clearer until the figure looked disturbingly like a real human face emerging from the floor. Maria tried what any practical person would try. She scrubbed the floor with soap, with bleach, with anything she had to hand. But nothing seemed to work. The image remained exactly where it was and seemed to be getting more expressive, not less. Her husband Juan Pereira and their son Miguel eventually took a more drastic step. According to their account, they destroyed that entire patch of floor with a pickaxe and poured fresh concrete over the spot. For a short time, the problem seemed solved. But then, on the new floor, a second face appeared. This time, even more detailed and more disturbing. By now, the neighbors knew something strange was happening in the Pereira home. People began to drop by, first out of curiosity, then out of morbid fascination. Within months, local newspapers started publishing photographs of the eerie faces in the floor and asking whether a haunting was taking place in this ordinary village house. The family's kitchen suddenly became a kind of informal tourist attraction. The mayor of Bélmez heard about the case, and instead of allowing the family to destroy the new image, he reportedly ordered that the section of floor be cut out under official supervision and taken away for study. This decision, meant to preserve evidence, also froze the story in place. From that point on, any new face that appeared on the floor would be watched not only by the family, but also by journalists, officials, and eventually by scientists, and perhaps new faces allegedly appeared over time. Some seemed male, some female, some skeletal and gaunt, others more lifelike. One of the earliest and best-known images became known as La Pava, a mustached face with dark lines where the mouth and eyes should be. Visitors claimed that the expressions on some faces changed from day to day, that they could look sad, angry, or terrified. In some accounts, the images even seemed to shift position slightly on the floor. By Easter of 1972, just months after the first stain appeared, hundreds of people were traveling to Bélmez to see the faces for themselves. The Pereira home was nicknamed La Casa de las Caras, the House of the Faces, and the constant flow of visitors brought an unusual kind of paranormal tourism to a poor agricultural village. For the next 3 decades, the family would claim that faces continued to appear, disappear, and reappear in different areas of the house. With that kind of attention, serious investigations were inevitable. One of the first thorough skeptical studies came from the Spanish Ministry of the Interior, which asked the engineer and paranormal investigator Enrique José Teister Jordan to lead a commission. His group included specialists in concrete chemistry who looked for any trace of fraud in the material itself. Jordan's report explored several possibilities of fakery, such as dark pigmentation with some brownish substance, a mixture of soot and vinegar, or the use of corrosive chemicals to alter the surface of the floor. Other researchers, like chemist Luis Ruiz Nogues, analyzed samples and found metal ions such as lead and chromium, elements often used in ordinary paints. To skeptics, this strongly suggested that at least some of the faces had been made, or at least enhanced with paint. From this perspective, the phenomenon could be a long-running hoax, maintained for attention and for the small but constant income from visitors. A sociologist from the Complutense University of Madrid, Manuel Martín Serrano, spent time in the village and later wrote a detailed study called Sociology of the Miracle. He focused less on the chemistry and more on the social dynamics. How a poor rural family A curious village and a hungry media ecosystem could all benefit from keeping the mystery alive. His conclusion was that, whether or not the faces began as a natural stain, the Bélmez case functioned socially as a miracle story, a local legend that brought status and much-needed money into the community. But not every investigator walked away unconvinced. In the early 1970s, two well-known parapsychologists, the German professor Hans Bender and the Spanish researcher German Diargamosa, took a special interest in Bélmez. They visited the house and arranged a simple but famous experiment. One of the clearer faces was covered with a transparent plastic sheet that was sealed and labeled in the presence of a notary to prevent any human tampering, and then left in place for some time. According to Bender and Diargamosa, the image still appeared to change beneath the sealed plastic, with the features becoming more or less defined over days. To them, this suggested that something more than paint or surface scraping was involved. Argumosa later went further, speculating that the faces might be a kind of ectoplasmic residue left by trapped spirits, and that Maria herself, as the longtime resident and emotional center of the house, could be unconsciously producing the phenomena. However, neither Bender nor Diargamosa ever published a full formal report in a peer-reviewed journal, which left critics free to question exactly how controlled their experiments really were. Other technical analyses added more ambiguity. The Spanish National Research Council chemist J.J. Alonso carried out tests whose results were published in a parapsychology journal. His work detected a dark organic compound in the images and confirmed that the floor had been altered, but he did not make a firm judgment about whether the faces were painted or truly paranormal. As a result, both believers and skeptics have quoted the same data to support opposite conclusions. One aspect that almost everyone agrees on is that human remains were found under or near the house. Excavations beneath the kitchen uncovered bones and skulls, believed to be centuries old, leading to the theory that the home might have been built over an old burial ground. Some versions of the story even claim that when the bones were exhumed and reburied in a cemetery, the intensity of the faces changed. Whether or not that detail is accurate, the presence of graves beneath the floor only strengthened the narrative that the images could be the restless dead forcing themselves into view. Over the years, visitors have described seeing not just one face, but entire clusters and crowds of figures in the floor. Photographs taken at different times show images that appear to fade, reform, or be replaced by new ones. Though skeptics note that lighting, angle, and wear can make the same stain look very different from day to day. This is where the psychological phenomenon of pareidolia becomes important. Human brains are incredibly good at recognizing faces, so good that we see them in clouds, in tree bark, in electrical outlets, and in random stains. When people arrive at the house of the faces, already expecting to find faces, they are far more likely to interpret every crack or shadow that way. Yet even pareidolia cannot fully explain why certain areas of the floor seem to attract more detailed images, why some faces had consistent outlines over years, or why they sometimes appeared in newly laid cement. Skeptics would answer that once the legend existed, it was easy for someone inside or outside the family to quietly touch up the most important stains whenever the house was empty. Believers countered that there were long periods when the kitchen was watched closely by journalists, parapsychologists, and even officials, and that faces still developed under that level of attention. The mystery did not end with María Gómez Cámara. She died in February 2004 at the age of 85, after more than 3 decades living in what many called one of the most haunted houses in Spain. After her death, a new wave of alleged Bélmez faces was promoted by the psychic priest Pedro Amoras, in collaboration with the municipal government, this time in a second house linked to the family. Spanish newspaper El Mundo later published a critical investigation accusing the group of faking the new images, and those second-generation faces are now widely regarded as hoaxes. Today, the original house has been closed to the public, but the story continues to draw visitors to the village. The local council even opened a small interpretation center dedicated to the Bélmez faces, turning the case into a permanent part of the region's tourist identity. For Bélmez, what began as a terrifying experience for one family evolved into a half-century of paranormal tourism, media coverage, and heated debate. So where does that leave us? On one side stand skeptics armed with chemical analyses that detect paint pigments and acid, sociological studies that highlight financial motives, and the simple observation that people are very easy to fool. especially when they are already primed to believe. On the other side stand believers, who point to sealed face experiments, to witnesses who claim to have seen changes under controlled conditions, to the discovery of graves under the house, and to the persistence of the phenomenon over decades. For believers, the Bélmez Faces remain one of the strongest cases of ghostly manifestation ever recorded. A haunting that left physical marks on stone and cement, not just on human memory. For skeptics, they are a textbook example of how legend, money, psychology, and low-tech trickery can combine to produce something that feels supernatural, without ever leaving the realm of human behavior. So what do you think? Were the faces of Bélmez the work of a gifted hoaxer with paint and imagination, the psychic fingerprints of forgotten dead beneath the floor, or something we still do not have the language or the science to describe? Leave your opinion in the comments below. What do you think about this case? Is this really supernatural or just another hoax, like many others in the world? Subscribe to the channel and share this video for more cases like this. See you in the next video.